Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. I'm your host and fractional CMO, Robert Mendelson, here in beautiful Montreal. Today we have a powerhouse panel to discuss one of the biggest topics in our industry, in the fractional world, and probably everywhere these days, AI, artificial intelligence. Joining me are two senior fractional leaders from Ontario. First, we have Mike Voss. Is that the right way to pronounce your last name, Mike? Is it Voss?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, Mike Voss. He is in Barrie, Ontario. He is an AI wrangler and fractional CMO who helps organizations with everything from C-suite communication to implementing innovative AI-driven solutions. And to his right on my screen, we have returning pod guest Stephen Pollack in Bracebridge, not too far away from Mike, a fractional technology consultant and veteran product leader who specializes in fixing broken product strategies. He is the founder of the company PlateSpin, which he exited and has been working with AI concepts for years. And Mike and Stephen are, of course, both contributing active members of the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook community. And if you're a fractional pro, fractional executive in Canada and have not yet joined us, please do so. Just go to Facebook and look for the Fractional Pros Canada group and join us. Today's Fractional Pros Canada podcast is powered by Your CMO, the proven framework for fractional CMOs. You can learn more at yourcmo.com. That's YORCMO.com. Mike and Stephen, welcome to the pod.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's dive in. So AI everywhere, you have two distinct perspectives. So let's start with you, Mike. From a marketing and strategy lens, what is the single biggest misunderstanding that business leaders have about AI's role in their company today?
I still think many people are afraid of AI. So you have a lot of companies that are trying to adopt it, but in many cases, how they're going about that is very, very insecurely, or they're not sure what to do. So they're opting to bring in things like Copilot Studio or Copilot slowly into their existing Microsoft Office tools. But you'll find that the people who really know what they're doing with AI or playing with AI, exploring with AI, they're using other kinds of tools that they're not even allowed to use on their work computers. So to bring all those skills that they've developed on their home laptops and the things that they've been playing, they can't do that in a work environment. Now I understand that's obviously a real challenge because at a big organization, things like security are very important. To roll out a tool and have some kind of a control over it, I mean, yeah, it is scary. I get that. But I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by locking it down too much.
Stephen, from a deep product and technology lens, what is the single biggest misunderstanding business leaders have about AI's role in their company today?
They don't understand it. With just the technology company lens in mind, it sort of hits them from multiple perspectives, which is uncommon if you look at past technology trends. So you have technology companies who have to face, where do I jam AI into my solution because everybody else is, and if my sales guys don't say this is AI enabled, then they're viewed as not competitive. And at the same time, as Mike was saying, I've got all my team appearing to be exploring how to benefit from AI, most saying it's a struggle. And then I have all the unknowns, which is if I do just let it all come in, what's it going to do for me downstream in terms of the risks I create? It's sort of a funny just one quick analogy that popped into mind is when, Rubik's cubes and fidget devices came into play. Everybody wanted one because they saw everybody playing with one, and then when they got one, they realized they had no idea what to do with it. So it went back to these people who could, solve it in 4 seconds, which is a narrow group of the population. So in some ways, there's a large portion of AI that still probably will get addressed that way. It'll be a small portion of the population that's really good at it and understands how to use it, and everybody else has to find their niche. So I'm concerned because it's moving faster than people can learn about it. And therefore we're just all setting ourselves up for all the movie scenarios we all like if we're sci-fi fans.
And I am one of those people who somewhere has a Rubik's Cube, which has served as a paperweight for decades.
Well, there you go. My youngest son can solve the 9x9 one, so there you go. I can't even solve the 2x2.
The youth of today.
Yeah.
Youth of today. In our June Fractional Pros Canada community virtual meetup, which time we're recording this was just last week, we got into a discussion about AI, and one of the key pieces of advice for fractionals was, instead of chasing every new tool that AI is offering, pick a lane, right? Focus on one thing that is going to be most useful for your business and just get really good at it. Stephen, from a product strategy view, how should a company decide which lane to pick?
Oh, that's a good multifaceted question. I think that, if you look at where you spend your time, and companies who are trying to create more efficiencies should always be looking at where they spend their time. If you looked at it, let's take product. If you look at it, you spend a lot of your time kind of avoiding the processes of product management because they're cumbersome. Writing specs, validating specs, testing plans, vetting with engineering requirements, customer documents. A lot of companies just kind of skirt all that because it's a lot of work. So that would be an example where if you said, you know what, I've got to get better at the discipline of product management as it's conventionally defined, and AI can do that for me, my whole company will be better off. Because when I come into an organization to help with product strategies that are broken, that's often what we're looking at is they just aren't executing the product management disciplines properly because they just don't want to take the time to do it. They're just, sit seat of the pants for a lot of things. So AI can remove that. I don't know what the opposite of seat of the pants is, but sit them in their chair and get them. Yeah, there's an expression needed there. Sit them in their chair and choose how to use it in order to regain control over the proper disciplines. And if you do that better than your competitor, you're more likely to come out with better products, that are stronger, faster. So I think that's different for different companies. Just to drop one last point, not every company will approach that in the same way because typically it's a loyalty issue to the product discipline of the leader, the CPO, which part of that they hold on to and which ones they don't. So it's different for different companies, but the principles are the same. If it can help you do competitive analysis because you don't do any of that, do it. If it can help you figure out what your feature usage loyalty is, do that. If it can, whatever it is, write better communication to your customers, whatever, just pick one of those or a couple of those and then just do those better.
Mike, what are your thoughts? How would you advise leadership teams to align their chosen AI lane with maybe their core brand, their marketing strategy, to avoid looking like they're just jumping on a trend, the trend of the week?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think AI, I mean, as new as it is, a lot of the problems that it solves are not new. So it's much like we've seen more, over the years, many times people will come up with a new approach to solve a challenge, but the challenge hasn't changed. And in many ways, AI is kind of doing the same thing. I think there's real value in understanding what it does well and what it doesn't do well. There are things, when I look at AI and how I use AI, there are things I think that are important because everybody needs to have some level of AI skill. What it can do really well is it can augment or give you super intelligence over and above your usual intelligence. It can augment what you can do. So there are things that you can do like practicing vibe coding, which is and what it does. And when I still used to work a lot in software development, when we would interview people to take up development positions, we'd ask them questions like, if you had to program 2 elevators in a building with 11 floors, how would you program those elevators? And the challenge was not really to understand whether they could code in a particular language, is how do they think? You know, when it comes to solving a problem, what are you thinking about? What are the variables you're considering? How do you think about actually trying to create something that solves a real problem? And vibe coding is a lot like that. You don't need to be able to code to create software anymore with AI, but you need to know how to solve a problem. You need to be able to think. So when it comes to learning about what AI does well, experimenting, playing with things like that to get you thinking in a way that because yeah, you can prompt a code, but very often what you get out from what you prompt in is not really what you were expecting. So I think in terms of being able to level up how you think about things, it's a hugely valuable tool, not just from a vibe coding perspective, but for things like brainstorming or role playing or um, when I need to do a business plan, I will query a few different I'll use ChatGPT, I'll use Claude, I'll use Perplexity, and I will sort of say, here's what I'm thinking, what am I missing? And it'll come up, and then I will start pretty broad, and then I will start to narrow it down, and I'll ask it to be varying levels of critical in terms of what I'm giving it, and say, well, don't just tell me what I want to hear, because it'll do that too. So I think there's definitely real value in understanding just what AI, as Stephen said, what it actually is versus what it isn't. Because I think there's a lot of videos about the stuff that everybody wants to do, and it's about efficiency, it's about automation. There's tons about that, but about really solving real business problems that haven't changed, there's far less about that. So I think, some of it is just learning really what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah,
Robert,
totally.
just a quick, if I can, just an interesting analogy on the vibe coding side, because I don't know if you saw me go like this, but sorry.
I saw that. Yeah, what's
Um,
that about?
so a good way I like to think about it is it's like you have a workshop. You're an amateur carpenter. You want to make yourself a table for your den. You go into your workshop, you slap a few things together with screws and nails, and you bring it back. That's totally fine. It serves a
Mm.
purpose. It holds your glass, your coffee up or your cocktail while you're watching TV. But don't open a furniture store with that approach. If you want to open a
Yeah.
furniture store, you've got to learn the proper disciplines of how to make furniture correctly so that
Mm.
somebody could sit on the table and it doesn't collapse and all these other things. So, vibe coding to me is one of those things to try because if you can create your own personal productivity tools, as we said at the beginning, you should. But if you're really going to rely on it like it's a commercial element of your tool
Yeah.
set, you really have, there's reasons why people go to school to learn programming. It's not to know how to write the code, it's know how to
Mhm.
design the code, it's know how to create a way for it to be secure, to be reliable so that you can extend it and add features to it. And AI can be good at that if you understand what the right starting point is. And I think as I talk to all my buddies doing coding with AI, we're all still learning. Like I've now been at it for months, written thousands and thousands and
Yeah.
thousands of lines of code and more than I care to admit. And I'm still realizing, oh, if I were to do this project again, I would
Mm.
start differently with my AI friends and go back to the beginning. So I think if you realize there's that line there, go ahead. But if you bury yourself in it, most programmers
Yeah.
who have problems with code hate that.
I think it's the biggest mistake that a lot of people are making today is simply that they're not taking the time to just play
Mm.
with all the
Yeah.
AI tools. They hear it in the news, they see things, they hear things from friends, but they're not actually taking the time to experiment and play with one of the models, different models, to really understand what it actually is, what it does, how it works, what it can and can't do well. And until you know that and get your hands dirty, and by the way, I can't think of something, at least for me, that I have had to dig into and do that and play with that has been so much fun.
Mm.
Often you need to learn something, level up your skills, and it's like, oh, I have to watch these videos and I have to take these courses. But this, you're playing with
Yeah.
these, human simulating machines that are having actual conversations with you. And if you, so to speak, close your eyes, you imagine that you're actually talking to another human being.
Mm.
And I've never had more fun learning, the learning curve than I have with AI right now.
Yeah. I
And you
think
can't
that's
cut
one
your
of the
finger off.
other, oh, sorry, Stephen, one of the other sort of big things that we have to think about, and I don't know if you were going to get there, but that's a good kind of segue in a way, is that we're going to be looking at hybrid workforces in the way that things go forward. So being able to be what I think Microsoft calls an agent boss, I think is a critical skill. You need to think about agents as employees that require supervision, that require boundaries, that require. So, if I was thinking about, diving into AI, as you said, it's really understanding again, kind of how they work and what they do and how to get the most out of them, as you would with any other employee. There are things that we do. Again, everything costs money. So when you're talking about scaling and you're talking about consuming tokens, choosing a different model, whether you use ChatGPT 4 Mini or you use GPT-3, uh, there's a huge difference in terms of what you're going to get. So when you would choose to run one of those, because there is a cost in terms of which one you choose to. So, while it's good to be able to pick something up and do something really quickly, when it comes to something at an enterprise level where you're scaling it, you're talking about something that you're going to be using as an organization, your considerations are very, very different to just playing. So you need to have that. So I think the danger too is trying to think that you can move too quickly without actually employing somebody who knows what they're doing. And then maybe it's easier and better to employ an AI expert than to try and sort of learn as you go, depending on the
So
size of your
are you saying the
organization.
move fast and break things mentality of Silicon Valley is not necessarily a good thing for all businesses?
Not all business, some yes.
Yeah, yeah. The advantage, of course, is unlike the workshop where you can cut your finger off, you can do a lot with AI without really hurting yourself. But so there's some interesting premises here. So Robert, in our other forums, always talking about treat AI like it's a person. It's kind of one of the things to get over with, and continue to say please and thank you because it's good practice, anyways. Um, when you look at it from that point of view, that's one of the skills that not a lot of people are good at. Interacting with someone with the right empathy, the right communication skills, the right unambiguous way of expressing things, which, of course, when you work with computers, and as a programmer, as I know, ambiguity is the death of programming. Because the program, the satellite crashes into the moon if you happen to put a comma where you should put a decimal point, as the old story went. Um, so that's where the risk is of AI today is the fundamental skills you need to interact with something as smart as AI is going to even more expose your weakness in your ability to formulate your goals. So good things to practice is go back to some of the basic principles of unambiguous communication, structured language, proper sentence formation, sequences, those sorts of things, because they will help you get a better result out of AI. When you get to programming, it's even a bigger issue. But the thing that's interesting for me is, technology is always meant to be at the center of organizations. If I go back, given my gray hair, the decades, when technology started to become affordable, every company wanted some, and they all built their data centers, or they did mainframes. But after that, they built their data centers. They got their own computers. They hired a bunch of IT people they could never talk to and communicate. And in theory, they were going to run the organization. Then you realize that there was a huge chasm between it and the organization that you couldn't get over. So if you were to start all that again and have an AI-centered organization, you would run the company differently because AI is at the center. And that's important, excuse me, because one of the value propositions of companies who are trying to create their own language models is they're trying to teach AI everything about their business need in one place as their own IP, and then use the AI tools on it in order to have benefit to the company. So that's different. So like the CEO being the AI expert is now in the middle, not one of the seats around the table. Or in my world, the product person's often in the middle because they're worrying about so many things. If the product team does things well by AI, they're taking care of go-to-market strategies, requirements, customer relationships, architecture oversight, product validation. They really are in the center of many, many things. And that's a good thing if you, again, use AI properly. So to me, the future, which unfortunately is probably like next Friday, but the future is, building new organizations that are AI centered, and in a way solve the problem of I don't need as many people. You just need different people, and one organization could do more things and therefore needs more people if it is AI centered. And I think until we get there, we're still going to have this fear of it taking over everybody's jobs, which is sort of nonsense at some level. Um, but companies can just do more things. We can get to, the next generation of a lot of things much more quickly and in no end.
Yeah.
There's sort of a background hum. I'm not sure if you're hearing it.
Yeah,
I,
and the other thing too is that I think there's a danger in just assuming that everything AI tells you is good, or is true even for that matter. We've all heard the stories of agents that made up policies to try and just be nice when they were doing customer service. And we need to realize that these companies that are building these LLMs are also moving very quickly because there's so much competition, there's so much pressure on them to evolve and to create these that it's almost moving faster than anybody can actually really be 100% sure that it's all, secure and it's all accurate and everything. So we have to bear that in mind. And when we do things with AI, we're always double checking. We're never assuming that what we get is accurate. We don't trust it that everything it says is correct. And so yeah, we do we choose different tools for different purposes because we found that some produce better results when you're asking certain types of questions or prompts versus others, and those things are important. You can't just sort of pick one because it's your favorite, and then it's like using Chrome versus using Edge. You can't do everything in Chrome. Sometimes you need to use Edge for certain things, and I think AI is a bit like that too. You need to be open to exploring things a little bit outside of your comfort zone.
there's no one size fits all.
No.
Beta still had something that VHS didn't offer, but it never made it.
Yeah.
Robert, to
Color
your earlier
profiles.
comment, although there's one interesting dynamic because we're in a sense early stage, the way I look at it, they are all leapfrogging each other really quickly,
Mm.
but they are all heading to the same place. So, I would sort of predict, not to be a predictor, but a year or 2 years from now, whatever, they all will have the same skills. They just don't have enough people to sort of work on them all at the same time. So they differentiate like anybody would by filling a gap the other one doesn't have. So one's better at coding, one's better at writing, one's better at deep thinking, whatever. But that's just a time issue. They all will, I think, ultimately get to the same place. The difference potentially being the language models they're based on, but the actual skill that they have to do what they do, I think, will converge. So it actually is counter to my point earlier. You do have to keep trying all of them regularly because they are leapfrogging each other. So what cloud may not do well today, it'll probably do well in a month, and then eventually OpenAI will have that, and it'll do well with ChatGPT, and then they switch, and then
Yeah.
that's what I'm enjoying that part because I'm trying to get 5 or 6 or 7 of them going in all the projects that I have, and I just keep figuring out today which one I should use.
I keep an eye on the LLM leaderboard, and every week or so I check in on it, and you see who just leapfrogged somebody else. There's a new version, an update just came out.
Yeah.
This one's now better for coding. This one's now better for reasoning, et cetera, et cetera. It's constantly in flux. It's very liquid, very fluid. Those are the times we're in, right? So what's great today, maybe yesterday is like old news because something great just came out. So you can't keep up. You just got to, and that's part of coming back to picking your lane, right? Find one tool that you're going to use, and even if tomorrow a competitor comes out with something that's apparently twice as good, hang on, because probably in another couple of weeks, whatever you're using now is going to catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we still have the human nature obstacle that we can't absorb information changing that fast between short-term memory, long-term memory, and everything else. But if the AI companies aren't using AI to develop the AI tools, that would be amazing, right? So they must be,
Yeah.
in which case we know they're going to be able to work at a hugely fast pace. And that's the norm. That's just the norm now. So like if you're an article publisher, I may have mentioned I have an app that's doing article publishing. I could publish an article every 2 minutes, but I know nobody will read them. So that's no good. I still have to send them out once a week or let you choose when you want them because you have to consume them. So this is a very interesting time. Like I would love to be inside the big AI companies and see how they've deployed AI tools because, the whole dog food concept is if I'm not using the tools to build the tools at the stage, like that's no good.
If a company is facing a choice right now of, they want to start adopting AI and they're looking at all the possibilities, and there's probably a number of voices telling them, build it from scratch. It's easy. You can do, vibe coding. You can do text code very easily, more and more easily every day. Just build it custom. versus use some of the off-the-shelf tools that are out there and, find a SaaS product that you like, which, by the way, SaaS companies are all in big trouble because of that choice becoming harder and harder to make. What are your recommendations? What do you guys think? What are the right criteria to make that decision with?
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not the same answer all the time. But yeah, for me, it would be again going back to trying to figure out what will help your business accelerate or close the gap on its biggest problem. If it's customer interaction, then go find the best web chat tool, understand how you feed it the right stuff so it doesn't just answer questions nonsensically or with no value, and deploy that and solve that problem. Instead of having customers complain about they come to your website and I get useless answers, links to big web pages, or nobody calls me back. If that's one of your problems, go solve that. And there's quite a lot of stuff out there about that. So that's really great. If you go to the other extreme of, what do I choose to go add value to my product? I think you first have to figure out the reality. Is there even a role for AI in your product if it's technology? And there isn't always, but people feel they need to, so they struggle with it and they just make a lot of bad choices.
Yeah, and things are moving so quickly. So, what exists today versus what exists in 6 months or a year, I mean, we can't even comprehend what that looks like. So, in some ways, what you were saying, Robert, is picking a lane is good. Pick a tool that you like, and chances are at some point it will do what you want it to do. And so it might be just sort of, but again, AI shouldn't be the lead. Your business strategy should still be the lead. And AI is just another way to enable or improve or enhance or sort of augment that. So I think there's merit in, if you're struggling and you think AI is going to solve all your problems, it's probably not. You need to be sort of thinking more about your strategy and maybe some of the fundamental issues that most companies face. AI is not a silver bullet that's going to solve it if you haven't sort of identified how to fit it in. And Steven said the same thing. There's some problems AI is not the best option for. Other ones it really is. There's some things it's really good at, and other things it's really bad at. So, but it might just be a matter of time before it does.
I think, Robert, that there's an interesting, maybe a middle ground here. Um, we all like. There's almost nobody now hasn't used ChatGPT in some way, shape, or form, or an equivalent, and they've used it to have a better Google search capability, essentially. Um, if you look at it as it's the cheapest way to hire a really smart person onto your team, and your business has 12 teams, then make sure every team has at least one person whose job it is to use AI, so that when you come to team meetings, you have that sort of 13th person, unknown soldier, sitting at the table, um, who has done the analysis to ask the questions that the team just wasn't able to take time to do or couldn't see. So that's that person's job. So every team has to have some chatbot thingy that they use. There's at least 4 or 5 good leading choices they won't go wrong with, and they should become really good at it. Do prompt training for them. Make sure they take whatever minimal class they need to get good at prompt engineering, and make sure in every meeting, every sort of business planning meeting, you always have somebody who says, okay, here's the analysis based on our input. Now let's discuss what this thing has told us, like they've just hired somebody. I think that would be normalizing for companies, not so fearful, and have a very good purpose and solve, again, one of the problems teams have is they often either don't have the time or the skill to run sessions like that, which is why, strategic planners and others come in, because we facilitate meetings like that because the teams can't. Well, you can sort of not need us anymore if you use AI properly at some level. You may need us to use AI properly, but you don't need us once you have it properly. So, that's a good place to go. And it's just normalized.
Yeah, I love how the conversation keeps coming back to a point that the business fundamentals don't change. It makes me think of when I started my first online store back in 2005, right? Early days, as they say in the e-commerce world, to sell product. And at that time, when I tell my friends, oh yeah, I just launched in this online store, they'll be like, wow, you're going to do great because it's online, right? It was as if this is the magic bullet, right? Now, you can fire all your salespeople. The website's going to sell for you. People are going to shop during work and in the middle of the night like they couldn't before because the store's open 24 hours. And you're going to be, retiring to wherever in a couple of years. And of course, no. And
Mm.
the business fundamentals didn't change, right? And now it just became, well, instead of figuring out how to get people into your bricks and mortar store, now you got to figure out how to get people into your online store. Same problem, just a different place. And same thing with AI. It's not the magic bullet. The business fundamentals don't change, and it's so important to remember that. And people who are thinking about, I've mastered AI, I am on the path to, easy ride for the rest of my life. Probably not the case.
You're rushing to smash your head into the wall in all
Yeah.
likelihood.
Yeah. Watch
So
out for that
wear not,
wall,
wear, not, wear a goalie mask when you walk around.
right?
Mm.
So let's talk about reframing the value proposition and the effect that AI is having on that as fractionals. So is, the double-edged sword of AI for fractional work is, on the one hand, it makes strategic fractional value that we deliver. It makes it easier for us to deliver it because we now have all these AI tools to help us with what we do anyways. But on the other hand, the client side is like, well, why do I need to spend money on a person to do this? Because the AI can do it for me, right? I can. So is AI helping fractionals, or is it commoditizing the work that fractionals have been doing up until this time?
That may be a category thing. So, there, like anything, I think there's certain types of fractionals that will be less and less, I guess I'll use the word relevant, as AI takes the niche, or not the niche places, well, maybe the niche places it should in an organization. And there are always, as we know, there's always been companies who can't even do the simple things or don't have time to do it. So they're happy to spend money on it. So that's great. Like that may still continue. Um, if you can be way more valuable as a strategic fractional in a short period of time for a company, that's way more valuable than having them spend 3 months getting you up to speed because they have to somehow communicate what they do and they haven't written it down and there's no other place to get it. If you can come in day one with all your briefing correctly in front of you, you can deliver value right away. And so speed of impact for fractionals should go up. In which case, we've debated offline around how much do you admit you're using AI in delivering your service. I think you almost have to take the approach you're going to declare it, but don't
Mm.
just say I use AI tools. Like, maybe be clearer in how it's being used for you to deliver it. Like I'm using it to get up to speed more quickly, just to say that as
Yeah.
one way to say it. That would be valuable because you're not going to pay me, 2, 3 days just to sit around in meetings and read things. So if you can give me what you want, I'm going to come in already, and I'm going to use AI tools for that. If you want me to create a big document for you, I'm going to use an AI to create a template. Why? Because it'll help me make sure I don't leave things out, and you're not paying me to write useless stuff. It can write most of it, so why not? And then I will stand behind the conclusions.
Yeah.
Mike, what's
No, I
your
think
take?
that's very valuable. I think for me, one of the biggest challenges of being a fractional is that I can only work so many hours a day, so many hours a week, so many hours a month. If there is a way to clone me or to bring efficiencies into what I do, is there a way to automate some of the administration or some of the prep work consuming large volumes of data of information and summarizing it for me? Those kind of things are a game changer for a fractional because they do. You can go in there, with foresight and insight that I mean, you could never have done it. You just didn't have the time to do before. You can, it covers your back. It makes sure you don't forget things that you train an AI agent to be, almost like, and I've done this. I've told it, who I am. I've given it my, examples of how I write, how I communicate. I've given it recordings of things I've done. And and it's pretty good at sounding pretty close to me for the most part. I mean, I never trust it to send anything automatically. I'll always send an approval step in the way, but it really does create some efficiencies for me and automation that allows me to do the stuff that's really valuable and less of the stuff that's less valuable, which as a fractional is a game changer. And for me, that's the biggest thing.
There's
So
a
the
new
world.
conversation and that's happening more and more now between prospects and fractionals, and it goes like this. So the clients ask the fractional, so do you use AI tools? And the fractional either says yes or no. Now, if they say no, either they're lying, or if they're not using AI tools, then if I'm the client, I'm walking away, because every fractional should be. But then the next question that the client says is like, well, okay, so you're using AI tools. So that means it takes you less time to do the work. So you're not charging what you used to, right? The rates are much more reasonable. And that's where it's that pivotal moment for the fractional to handle that in the right way and explain that, no, it's not about the hours, it's about the value. And the value that I'm going to deliver to you is still the same, and probably is going to be better and more because I'm using the AI tools. So it's not about how much you're paying me per hour, because I don't even calculate my hours, right? I'm looking at, you tell me what the scope is, you tell me what value I need to provide, I'm going to provide it. And of course, I'm going to try to under promise and over deliver. And with using AI tools, it makes it more and more easy to do that over delivering these days. But what are your guys' take on that? Like, how would you handle that conversation?
So, I mean, maybe I'm a bit different here because I have the sort of technology focus, which has a different scope to that answer. But having said that, my job is to be an expert in my subject matter. Otherwise, I can't help you. So I could almost answer you saying, well, if I said no, that would seem kind of silly, wouldn't it? Because I'm here to help you with product strategy. So clearly, I need to know about AI. If I've only used ChatGPT to help me, that would be silly too. I must be practicing how to code. I must be practicing all kinds of things because it gives me that insight. So if you want savings, then how well organized are you to get me up to speed? Like, that's kind of the insurance game, right? So the companies who have experienced it being quicker for me to do what they do, it's because they're organized and they have taken a few steps forward. And maybe I can help you with that first. So that'll cost you the same amount, but then the next project will be less. Or we go deeper. If I can get you, past your phase one more quickly, we'll just do phase 2, 3, and 4 at the same time. So let's come in and analyze that. Let's come in and see whether I can go farther than you're originally asking because I can do it faster and therefore cheaper. So that original budget actually will get you more. That's my sales approach. Hasn't always worked yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I hate those in a way. Well, I say I hate, but it's a challenge, and I like challenges. So I think one of the things is, I try and turn it around a little bit too. That if I'm looking at something, AI is able to give me a pretty good indication of what the real value is or the cost. I mean, we have something we do with organizational structure and culture, and there are research reports, analyst data. There's a bunch of things that can give us a pretty good idea of what a misalignment in organizational culture and strategy can actually cost the business. So if that's the issue that they're looking for us to solve, I can say, well, okay, you have how many employees? What do you pay them? I know what benchmark attrition rates are and things. I can say, well, listen, for an organization like yours, this issue is costing you X, Y, Z. I can solve that for you. Or I can ask them. I can say, do you know how much this is costing you? Do you know, and when you're coming in and say, well, I can fix that. So they know I'm going to be saving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, then that gives me a really good place to start from. Because it's about the value delivered. I think it's not about how long it takes. It's about how, really that's what it is. And if you can prove it based on data, then you're in a really good place to start. Because you can talk about your qualifications and your skills and things, but when you can actually show them numbers, that's where you get ahead. And then it's on them, not on you, to prove yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I think like value selling is always better anyways. I think we all know that. So if somebody's approaching a fractional and all they want to know is how long something's going to take because they're judging that as the cost versus the value to them as a business, you should try, it won't always work, of course, but you should try and get them onto the other track. How much is this report worth to your business? Like I said, if I'm going to impact your product strategy and, grow your customer base by 10% on a, $100 million business, that's certainly worth more than $5,000, even if it only takes you 20 minutes. That's not what should be relevant. If it's time, it's time. It is what it is.
Mm.
But I would argue you use that time to educate the people on how much more value you could bring, and then eventually you become more strategic to them, and that should help change. So,
Absolutely.
I know
Yeah.
always easier to say than to do, but human nature still has its
Yeah. And I
standard
like to get
rules we have
them
to meet.
talking too. Sorry, Stephen. It's like, I'm sure we've all experienced it when you're playing with AI. It's so easy to go down a rabbit hole. You can have a really quick little thing that you're trying to do, and the next thing you know, you've had to download 15 different apps onto your thing, and you're connecting things and you're trying things, and it's you wake and it's like 5 hours later. It should have taken you 10 minutes. And it's the same kind of thing, really. It's like, yeah, you can do it yourself. You can try and do it cheaply. Or you can get somebody who really knows what they're doing, who's done the hard work of figuring out what works, who's done the hard work of knowing which tool to use for which application. And there's huge value in that. So, sometimes it's about, like, well, tell me, what have you tried? How have you tried? Because surely you've tried to fix this problem. Why do you need me? And if you can get them talking about, oh, well, they've tried this and they haven't, then you can say, well, I know how to solve that thing. You know, and then you're speaking to them about the value again. It's always about turning that around.
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
talk about
already.
AI. Sorry, Steve. I want to move on to AI adoption. So AI
Mm,
adoption is a big topic, and a lot of companies are struggling with how do I socialize this into my company. A lot of my employees are afraid that AI, as soon as I say we're adopting AI, all of a sudden my employees are afraid that their jobs, their days are numbered. AI is going to replace them. What are your suggestions on the best way for, a CEO or a C-suite executive to present this to their company? We've seen some extreme examples of, like, I think Shopify was one of the examples
mm,
where they announced that as of today, there's a hiring freeze and nobody is allowed to hire anybody unless they can prove that whatever role they're hiring for cannot be done by AI. Now, that's a pretty extreme example, but for the average company out there, what's a good way for, top management to introduce the concepts of the company that don't be afraid, people. We're going to start integrating AI into our daily operations. You're going to use it in your daily work. And no, the goal of this is not that in 90 days from now, you're out of a job.
Maybe one way to start. I mean, again, forget about it even being AI. The safest way often is you have to take the emotional fear out. So trying to come up with kind of innocuous introductions are good ones. If the CEO wants to lead the charge, which may or may not be relevant to a certain company depending how they lead, they can pick a project and say, hey, I just created this. I asked AI what it thought the top strength, do a SWOT analysis on our business strategy. I gave it the business plan, and here's what it created. Let's have a meeting where we can talk about what it found. And people will say, well, I didn't know it could do that, or that's interesting, or I've got a better one because I've been playing with it on the side, right? A lot of people will reveal that they have been personally doing a lot of AI things, and you just sort of go out from there. Well, that's great. So why don't we, 3 months from now, you'll come to the next quarterly meeting and pick what tool you want to use and use it for that. Um, I think those are good ones. If you want to give projects, I think you have no choice. Like, HR is
mm.
a right place for using AI just to create better policy documents for bigger organizations. So, it's one of those places they all complain. I think the product one's different. That's just different. And coders thinking they're going to lose their jobs, while true, there is a merging of product and engineering that can go on that preserves your jobs. You just have to shift the skill set a bit.
Yeah.
So that one I think unfortunately is inevitable. But all the rest, just, pick a few projects that are safe and go, because do you need to survive on it? Not yet, but you will shortly. So again, I think unfortunately you have no choice.
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, no, there will be some jobs that absolutely will go away. And the same thing happened with, production lines and other things. I mean, those kind of the industrial revolution. I mean, that's inevitable, but I think for me, it's always about focusing on the positive. So, I mean, everybody knows if I don't know AI, I'm going to struggle to find work, whether it's in my company now or whether I'm wanting to progress and someday work for another company. So if you're saying, well, we're going to upskill you, that should be attractive to a lot of different people. I think putting it in a positive spin is that, we're augmenting ourselves. We're enhancing what we can achieve and what we can deliver. We are allowing ourselves to focus on, the work that really requires the skill, that requires the human, and not have to do all the administrative stuff that everybody hates doing anyway. So, some of it is really just about spinning it in the right way. But it absolutely has to be led from the front. And that, it has to be, and it has to be done. And I think Stephen's suggestion is a good one, where it's shown in ways where it adds value without making you think, uh-oh, like, what's left for me to do? You know?
Yeah. Mike, you made me think of when you said it, AI should augment what you already
Mm,
do in your job and not replace you. I had a flashback. I don't know if Mike, you're old enough to remember this. Stephen, you probably are, but the Bionic Man.
oh yeah.
Remember that series, right?
Mm,
Of
So
course. Yeah.
for those who were too young, the Bionic Man, look it up. That was a series was the 80s, maybe even late 70s.
yeah,
I don't know. Lee Majors.
The majors,
And it
yeah.
that's
was,
right.
right, it was this guy who was in a terrible accident. I think he was like an army vet or something like
He
that.
was a
Terrible
pilot.
accident,
He had a crashed flight.
Yeah,
right? Crash. And they implanted, bionics, right? These robotic arms, robotic legs. One of his eyes was robotic, so he could, it's as if he had like a telescope in his eye, etc. And that's the same concept of AI. It's kind of like it's not going to implant in you, at least not yet. Maybe tomorrow we're going to have the Matrix,
yeah.
stem
Neural.
going in, but
Mm,
that's it. It should be augmenting what we do
mm,
and making us more productive and better at our jobs, but
yeah,
not replacing our jobs. And that's, I think,
So
the
yeah,
big
yeah,
fear that the
yeah,
masses have right now.
yeah. There's a flip side to that too, in that I read a recent study where they were saying how it actually affects our brains. If we use AI to do too much of your thinking, it actually has a detrimental effect on not only on your current brain function, but in how your brain develops new pathways that we all, because when we learn something new, our brain literally forms new neural pathways. And if we rely on AI to do everything without having to think, it's going to dumb us down. And that's certainly, and that's why my whole approach is always this, like, you know, how do I keep learning? How do I use it to augment what I do? Is how do I don't want it to replace my thoughts. I want it to help me be better. I want to ask smart questions. I want to leverage what I already know and let it do the stuff that I don't want to do or that it can do really, really well. And that would take me a lot longer to do. Um, so, so it's an interesting kind of, flip on the whole thing as well that we don't, and I think that when we have people coming into the workplace now, the younger generation, where they haven't had to do some of the things that we necessarily did the hard way. I think sort of we should be thinking about how we teach people to solve problems, how we teach people to coexist with AI as another employee or something, as opposed to it being an entity just taking your job.
can I bring up a Star Trek quote?
I mean, who's not a Trekkie? Go for it.
Well, it was a Wrath of Khan line, which was sort of comparing the benefits of improving technology around you versus the benefits of improving people around you, and it was sort of making the 100-to-1 ratio concept. So I think in this case, if you look at a typical business, if you could go in tomorrow and reduce the workload by 10%, of course that'll fall to the bottom line and they'll get some benefits out of that. But if you would improve sales by 10%, that would have a much bigger improvement on the
Yeah,
value of the business than the people. So, you could again argue the first problem is make your business better, don't make it cheaper. Then you can take the benefits of that and figure out how to gradually make it cheaper so you're benefiting at both ends. But initially, there's many more companies who could benefit from operating better than to have less people.
mm,
And the U.S. government's a good example there, probably.
mm,
So let's jump on that. Let's do what we
mm,
can to make our existing team better, and that way our business will improve. And then if we get attrition and we don't hire and whatever happens, while we figure out what the role changes are, that'll just naturally happen. And look at that, it'll also cost less. But I would
mm,
never start with cost reduction, especially if you have to back up which I think is one of the fear factor issues. We haven't talked about risk, Robert, but people adopt
There's no
AI.
risk here.
And they'll have to back up at some point. They'll probably over adopt it. A lot of companies will over adopt it, and they'll realize they need to find a better middle ground. And if they've let a bunch of people go, they're really going to have a lot of problems, recovering from that.
We're going to leave risk to another pod, another day. Let's wrap this up. If you could put a message out on a billboard that is your one sentence of advice for AI, for businesses, for fractionals, what are you putting on that billboard? Millions of people are going to see this billboard every day. So what are you putting up there for the masses to learn from?
Let me just put that into ChatGPT quickly.
Yeah, just give me top 10 answers and then
hire
recommend
Canadian fractionals for your AI problems. It's funny. I found myself jokingly writing AYE sometimes for AI, like you're saluting AI. In a way, that's part of it, but it's just like a don't fear message of some kind is probably the right thing to do. It's just one of those things. I would like to see everybody learn about it, especially at school. It's a fundamental game changer for how we learn. So that's an area that'd be interesting, but I don't know that would be the billboard one. But just pick something and run, like the message of staying in a swim lane and going.
Mike.
Yeah, I think it'd probably be much the same. I think there's tremendous value in not being scared and just playing with AI. I think that the best thing anybody can do right now is just play with AI. So it might be something around don't be scared, play with AI. The more you play with it, the more you start to figure out what it does well and what it doesn't do well. You start to figure out how to prompt it to get the results that you want. Those are the skills that matter, not ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, I've say to people often, you're either on the AI bus or you're going to get run over by the AI bus. I think that's on my billboard.
Actually, I have a white paper with that theme coming out shortly around the bifurcation between those that do and those that don't. But it sort of another sort of amusing analogy came from MASH with the Tuttle episode. I don't know if you followed MASH when they made up this fake soldier and everybody pretended he was real. It'd be interesting to have people like HR say, I've just hired this new person, called Stephen Mendelson, and what work do you want him to do? And, they just orchestrate everything for him, and it's all virtual today, so you can even do avatars now, and you never really hired anybody. You've just got, you're paying somebody and you're pocketing salary, which was the MASH story.
Spin up a new employee. Awesome. All right, gentlemen, this has been great. Mike, how can people connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest. It's LinkedIn/IN/MIKEA Mike A. Voss. Otherwise, whatnext.ai, WATT next.ai.
All right. And Stephen, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, two ways. So LinkedIn for sure. And it's my full name. So Stephen Pollack for profile. And then also I have my business website, insidespin.com, where I've done a lot of publishing over the years on some of these types of, well, actually I have the AI topics up there now as well. But, anything to do with technology, there's a lot of stuff there. So you can contact me through that.
Great. Thanks again for joining us today on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Robert.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.